Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. It's G here. Um, I'm going to tell a personal story, and I have been thinking about how to talk about this, and I was recently had an exchange with one of my cousins, and so I think I know how I want to talk about this now because I think that she and I have had some parallel experiences, and I wanted to talk about this. I think a lot of us feel like our parents robbed us of something during our childhood. And I want to talk about how, or what I feel like I was robbed of, and how I've been coping, how I dealt with it. Because you know what? I never got an apology. I never got an apology for any of the things that I was put through as a child. And I've had to move on from that. So, guys, subscribe to my channel and let's have a little chat.
See how I come to work? Very demure. I do my makeup. I lay my wig. Very demure. Very mindful. Let's not forget to be demure divas.
Okay, I always thought this was an odd thing in my family, but apparently it's quite normal. But three sisters married three brothers from another family, right? So my grandmother and her two sisters married three brothers. So all of my cousins all have the same last name, and they all grew up in this like way of like sister brother cousins, right? So even though someone might be my mom's cousin, I would call him uncle, kind of thing. Now, of course, the family split off and there's children. Like my mother is not like of this big group of cousins. She has a different father. And the my actual uncle, he died a long time ago. But I still grew up in this idea of like everyone's sister, brother, cousins, whatever. But my mother always kind of separated herself. I don't know if it's because she didn't have the same last name. She always felt like, she was a darker skin cousin or whatever. And I guess she felt like most of the female cousins were lighter skin. Like whatever it was, she always separated me from everyone else. So as my cousins are growing up, they're growing up with this kind of sister cousin thing more than I am. I'm a cousin. They're like sisters. So, and the interesting thing is this cousin that I'm talking about, where I think we have parallel experiences in some ways. I don't know her whole story, so I'm telling my story. Um, I think it's just the feeling of missing out, having a parent that focused on their selves more than being a parent or, their children, whatever it is, and not feeling like you fully fit in the same way everybody else seems to just like gel. And the interesting thing is, growing up, I always thought that she was a part of that group more so than I was. Because like I said, I wasn't there seeing everybody. It's just like one of those things that I always assumed she was more a part of that group than I was, the group of sisters that were cousins, right? And I always felt what my mother would say about other people was strange. It never like even her thing with colorism and being a brown skinned girl compared to some of my lighter skinned cousins. I never felt when I was around people were treating me some way because I was not, a lighter complexion. Never felt that way. So I was always curious why my mother did. And that was some internalized thing that I've never, ever really been able to understand about her. So within our family, I'm not talking about the greater society at large. I'm talking about within my family. So I grew up just kind of like reserved away from everyone. I was shy. There was a lot of things going on in my house that I couldn't talk about and was afraid of. So, my mother was a victim of domestic violence for most of my life by my brother's father, not my father, but my brother's father. And there was so much there were so many secrets that needed to be kept. And there were so many things that I was afraid of experiencing, that I just always, like, even at family functions, I was probably like really quiet. I like really didn't talk to anyone very much. And a lot of times, like when I talk about like growing up, I'm like, no, I feel sometimes like I survived more than it was just like this great childhood experience. And when I was talking about that on this trip, you know, one of my family members was recognizing that they saw that I was going through something, but they assumed that it was something related to how my mother was brought up. And I don't know like the history of everything. You know, my mother paints my grandmother as very mean, in some ways. So I'm like, maybe she went through something with her, but, you know, that wasn't my experience with my grandmother, of course. And my grandmother, for me, was the connecting factor to this family that was bigger than I was. And when she passed away, I definitely don't feel like I had any connecting thing because I didn't have the close relationships with my cousins that they had with each other. And I wasn't able to really feel like they reached out or they even cared, right? Like, even when they would come to my city when we were adults, nobody thought about me. And I think about it now in two ways. It's like, well, why would they? Sometimes, why would they think about me? Because they have always had this this circle that was just them. And maybe they also want to continue that and don't know how to branch out to other cousins who were never a part of that. And they also never had the discussions of why wasn't I around? Did they think it was me not wanting to be around? Do they believe the BS that, or think I believe the BS about how they were, fast was what my mother would always talk about growing up. I have no idea. And I would say that I think it's just something that was habitual in some ways and not necessarily personal. Or it could be personal. Maybe they don't like me. I don't know. But I think that one of the things that for me, as I navigate healing from all of the things of places or people or whatever I felt some sort of abandonment about, because and even knowing that people thought like, you know what my mother was doing wasn't right. They didn't come and get me. They didn't call up and say, you know what, let me just come and get you. Let me just take her and, make sure that she knows that we're not like that. I will say I had one uncle as I was getting older. He wanted me to run track. And I think that by then I was like probably like early teens. By then I had become so closed that I was scared to be seen. I was living in a house with domestic violence. I was, just didn't want the attention. I didn't want, I didn't know how. I didn't know how to be around people sometimes. Because, my mother would always be like, don't talk about my business. Don't do this. Don't do that. And I was too stressful. It was like easier just to be by myself. And I think that the friends that I had, the friends who were the people that became like my family, became the girls that are now women who know my entire story, who were the ones who called. I called when my mother tried to have my son taken away from me. When I think about like the family I made, that is why I end up when I go back home only being with my friends, only being around the people who know me, like have been able to see me grow into myself as an adult. So this concept of feeling like you're robbed of something, that is the actual feeling. My mother has robbed me, like literally, just like that girl described her mother taking her money. My mother has stolen cars from me. She has stolen money from me. Wow. She tries to. Mm-hmm.
I didn't touch it.
No, come sit. Are you gonna come sit with me? Okay.
But I want to catch a lizard.
You want to catch a lizard?
Yeah.
But the lizard doesn't want to be caught. She also tries to get my oldest son taken from me, and that's when I vowed I would not live with this woman ever again in my life. And I I look back on it, and I still talk to my mother, but
But what?
and no matter what the egregious thing has been, if I brought it up now, so if I brought any of these topics up to her now, if I tried to say this hurt me in some sort of way, this was something, she doesn't acknowledge it. In fact, there was the reason that she tried to, or the way she tried to get my son taken away from me. It's not the reason, but is he was almost 1 year old and I wanted to sleep train him, but she didn't want to hear him crying. So she would rock him to sleep every night. And I was like, you got to stop this. I was in school. I was, working, and, I have a kid. So I can't be rocking a baby to sleep every night when I could be using that time to study, to do work, whatever. So I come back after I've asked her to stop doing this. I come back and she's doing it. So I pick him up, take him in the room, close the door. I'm in the room with him. So I'm trying to, he's crying, whatever. In there with him, and all of a sudden, it's knocking on the door. And he's crying, and I'm like, I don't say anything at first. And then they knock again and say it's the police. So I'm like, this is my bedroom door. So I'm like, okay. So I open the door, the police come in and, they check him out. They tell me that they got a call that I was like being neglectful or something like this. And I was done. I called my best friend. She came and got me. And I was like, I basically was almost homeless after that with a kid.
Mom, who?
It was mommy. So the only people that in this period of time that I could really depend on were outside of my family, except like my grandmother who wanted to help me. I had one family member from like my mom's real dad's side, or whatever it is, help me get an apartment and, co-signed me for an apartment eventually. But I never, even growing up, I could not tell my father everything that was happening in my house, but I told him I needed help and I didn't want to live there anymore. And he was like, well, I don't want to fight with your mother. So I never grew up with this idea that someone would fight for me. Someone would try and, keep me safe, protect me, whatever. And I stopped expecting an apology from my mother because ultimately she was not in any place at that time, and perhaps even now, to truly acknowledge what she did and why she did it and what her motivations were. And I know like I was hurt for a really long time. I was hurt, but I think that knowing how few people in my life I had to depend on, and I didn't want that to be like my friends' burdens to bear in any sort of way, I never actually had animosity towards my cousins because they also didn't know what I was going through. They were children, I was children. I do sometimes, like now thinking about it, wish that the older people in my family took more of an interest to say, well, yeah, no, that's not right. Even if that's the way she wanted to, like, them to be, they could have been calling, let's make sure that these kids are okay over there. Like, why are they so isolated? But everybody lives their life. And I think us making our lives the way we want them is how we start to feel. And I think for me, they talk about healing your inner child. And I think for me, doing all of the things with my son growing up that I don't think I ever got helped do that, like taking trips and having experiences and continuing that, following a path that was not expected or charted for me, living where I want to live and how I want to live. I think those are the things that help heal my inner child to be free, in some sort of way that did not limit me on all of the things that I experienced and all of the things that made me sad, because I felt so sad growing up and alone and unloved and unwanted. And I know that isolated me even more because it was just like all I really did. The only place I really felt safe was at my grandmother's house, and I didn't always want to be there. So,
Mom,
hmm,
who the Granny house?
my grandmother, she died.
Oh, she died.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that's what healed me, and I think we all have to find a way to heal our inner child and heal it without getting all of the validation from the people around us that we want that validation from. And I think that's what just helped me. I don't want to say get over it. I think that's what helped me learn from it, helped me grow and be like a better parent, a better person to myself, and to spend more time centering myself, because I never want to lose myself again after it took me so long to actually develop into who I want to be. So guys, subscribe to my channel, and ciao for now.